Greetings and welcome. We are in 303 and we turn now back to Mr. Conrad's Unstoppable volume. I am with you in chapter 31 and I hope that you're also looking at your journals. Let's begin really quickly by making a couple of quick observations for focus here for chapter 31. Go ahead and jot down in your journals really quickly the importance of a model as sometimes the best way to learn. Now, let's think about that for just a moment. A model is something that you look at and then you make the decision you want to be like that model, that we call positive models, or you do not want to be like that, that we call negative models. There is an argument that says in the history of the world that negative models are every bit as important as positive models, no question. Where we look, for example, at an individual who is behaving in a certain way and say, not going to be like that person. Let's take a look now at lesson 31. This is in some ways the continuation now of an earlier couple of chapters. Of course, as we were talking about Clint Haskins and the experience of Clint Haskins, the taking of a number of lives due to a drunk driving accident, and more particularly in this chapter, a school presentation that ended with, of all people, his mother. Let's take a look. Lesson 31, a message from Mom. This was going to be huge. It was definitely the biggest thing that ever happened to our school. After a dozen or more presentations at other schools, Clint would speak live from prison via telephone to his alma mater. Clint, speaking to over 700 students at his former high school, attracted national media attention. Remember, it was in this same auditorium that Clint had heard Don Smith's phone call when he was a freshman. CBS's The Early Show would send 2 people from New York, 2 cameramen from Los Angeles to cover the event. The CBS affiliates would air this segment all across the country. Millions of people would see it. Many of Clint's friends and family would be in the auditorium to hear Clint's live phone call from prison. However, what would take this presentation of the Unstoppable You off the charts was a message from his mom. Lynn Haskins would speak to the crowd while Clint was listening on the phone. I was granted permission from the Wyoming State Penitentiary to put together a video slideshow of Clint and the prison. I took my best friend and fellow teacher, Lance Scranton, along with me. Lance is 6'2", weighs 250 pounds. He bench presses 510 pounds. He played professional football in Canada for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Your job's to cover my back, I told Lance. Halfway through our visit at the prison, I was thankful he was along. Although we were told we wouldn't come into direct contact with the inmates, we did. It happened as 2 separate groups of inmates were coming and going to lunch. Lance and I were trapped between 2 sets of locked hallway doors. There were approximately 30 inmates and 2 of us temporarily locked in that hallway together. With no guards in sight, the inmates checked us over like new fish, a term they used to describe fresh new inmates. Waiting for the doors to open was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Lance later told me he was praying the whole time. Little did either of us realize that that same hallway would be the site of a stabbing a few weeks later. The entire prison went into lockdown. Our phone call with Clint was canceled. The CBS crew that was already in Colorado went back to New York. What a bummer. When the prison goes into lockdown, they interview every single inmate. This keeps the source of information anonymous. The process takes weeks, sometimes months. All we could do was wait. I figured the CBS crews from LA and New York would never come back to our little town the second time. Unbelievably, after 2 weeks of lockdown, the crews returned. The Unstoppable You presentation was on again. All of this was especially hard on Lynn Haskins. She wasn't really sure she wanted to do this from the beginning, and now it was getting harder. I made her a deal. Since no one knew she was going to speak that day, I would let her decide right up until the last minute if she would do it. She would let me know after Clint's phone call by nodding her head. I told her I would respect her decision either way. Finally, on Friday, January 21st, 2005, the much anticipated presentation of the Unstoppable You was about to take place. The entire school was buzzing. Seeing Tracy Smith from The Early Show and the camera crews just added more anticipation and excitement. The day before this, Tracy Smith and the television crew interviewed Clint in prison. Now they wanted to get the reaction of the students listening to a former graduate, and what a reaction it was. First, We played the movie that Lance and I put together from our visit to the prison. It was titled Stoppable with Clint Haskins. Featured were miles of razor wire and unforgettable images inside prison walls. When the movie ended, the whole only sound you could hear was the dial tone, as I called the penitentiary. As always, I talk first to Monty Thayer, the director of the In-Reach Outreach program at the prison. He answers my questions and tells the audience that 95% of all inmates are in prison because of drugs and alcohol. 95% of all inmates are in prison because of drugs and alcohol. He also shares some stoppable stories. He tells of one inmate who at age 13 was scared to smoke dope. That same guy would later kill his best friend to get his pot. He used a hammer to crush his skull. After speaking to Monty, Clint got on the phone. As soon as his voice came over the sound system, pictures of him from high school flashed across the movie screen, larger than life. His voice, along with the images, set off a cascade of emotions. While answering my questions, Clint told the sullen crowd about the first time he drank. I was a sophomore, and I was invited by the seniors to a high school party, wanting to fit in. I went to the party and drank, Clint said. He also spoke about the first time he made a decision to drink and drive. Some girls needed a ride home, and I didn't want to appear that I couldn't handle the situation, so I drove them home. When Clint talked about the accident on September 16, 2001, his voice cracked with emotion. Pictures of the 8 runners and the Jeep Wagoneer flashed up on the screen. It was gut-wrenching. He said, "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about those 8 guys and what I'm responsible for." I asked Clint about the recent stabbing and lockdown incident. What are some of the fears you live with every day, I asked. Most of his fears were for his family, that something would happen to them and he couldn't be there. One of his worst fears happened last year. Clint's grandfather died and Clint was unable to hug his grandmother at the funeral and tell her, "I love you." Clint and I always end our phone conversation with his powerful testimony to accept my challenge to be unstoppable, drug and alcohol free. He tells kids he once accepted the same challenge, but did not take the commitment seriously enough. 7 years ago, I was sitting right where you are. You don't want to be where I'm at 7 years from now, Clint told the crowd. At that point, I glanced over at Lynn Haskins. This was her cue. Would she decide to speak? She was dealing with her own emotions this entire time. I couldn't believe it. She was nodding yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special guest here today, and she would like to talk to you. Please help me welcome Lynn Haskins, Clint's mom. With Clint still on the phone listening, the cascade of emotions turned into full-blown tsunami. Every single person was in tears, even my buddy Lance. The television crews scrambled to get their microphones into position to receive this message from his mom. I hugged Lynn as she walked on stage and whispered, "You can do this." The only sound you could hear was hundreds of people sobbing. After adjusting the microphone for Lynn, she cleared her voice and sang, "This is real. And this can become a reality for any one of you. Bad things do happen to good people. Hello, my name is Lynn Haskins, Clint's mother. As Clint's mother, I could go on and on about his accomplishments, his kindness, and the quality person he is. However, you should know that in this situation, those things don't matter. It doesn't matter how good of a person you are. Making the choice to drink and drive can change you and your family's lives forever, as it has ours and the families of 8 other wonderful young men. My dreams for Clint have turned to worries. I worry about his safety, about how the environment of a maximum security prison may change who he is and the future he will have. I worry that the twinkle in his eye may be gone forever and the pain will never go away. And that people who judge him so harshly can't see him for who he is, and that he's not so different from their son, brother, or friend. Please don't let this happen to you and your family. I support what Mr. Conrad and Clint are doing, so I encourage you to take the challenge. Thank you." As Lynn left the stage, over 700 people stood up and gave a heartfelt standing ovation. Clint heard it on the other end of the line. More than 700 kids made a commitment that day to be unstoppable. To date, That number is close to 100,000. Hopefully, they will keep the commitment they made so they will never have to experience what my grandfather went through. For most of his life, he was rough, tough, and hard to bluff. Let's go ahead and make a couple of quick observations in your notes about this chapter. It's clearly a powerful, powerful chapter. Notice the firsts of your life. Did you notice this? Notice here the first time he decided to take a drink. The first time that he decided to drink and drive. Notice the pressure that he felt. He reports this. The pressure that he felt to fit in challenged him to do something that he probably knew he shouldn't do. Hey, did you notice this one? Let's point this one out for your notes. The young learn from the old. This is a powerful idea. The way you learn to grow up, the way you learn to become a high school student is by watching high school students when you're in middle school. That's how you learned it. Vice versa, middle school students are now watching you to learn how to be a high school student. We have asked this question before, and I think it's a legitimate one. Are you prepared to say right now to sixth graders, by the time you're a senior in high school, make all my choices. Do it the way I've done it. And if you answer to that, no, two observations. One, it's too late. They've already been watching you. You don't have a choice. They watch you the same way you watched people who are older than you. If you drink at all, the odds are you watched somebody older doing it and invited you to do it. That is an absolute truth. And the obvious question is, if those young people who watched you go out and do something that ends up hurting, tragically hurting themselves or somebody else, are you at all responsible for that? This suggestion says, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. The challenge, of course, here then is to be a proper role model for the younger. Finally, the mom's message. Notice this one. It's not about being a good person. It's not about doing all of the right things. It's about making choices that protect both yourself and then those you love. Notice how constantly we're reminded that Clint did not just damage himself, and of course the tragedy of killing some other people, but all the families. The ripple effect is prodigious, yes? This is one of those powerful realizations. A lot of times, students who have come to this kind of unstoppable philosophy realize, you know, I guess I never really fully understood the power of a negative model. And here one is for you, right? As you think about, obviously, choices going forward. There you go, lesson 31 in the Unstoppable program. Thank you.